I do not know if you already covered, but could you tell us which inks require more maintenance, be cleaned more often, and would harm the nib, feed, or the pen body itself? Okay, so first let me say that the whole like harming of the pen kind of thing really gets overdone. It gets overhyped or over dehyped or whatever you call it. People really jump on some inks for the way that they will temporarily stain some pens or some perceived damage to it. Yes, there are some inks that will have some issues with certain pens. Particularly I've been shooting emails back and forth between different like nibmeisters and stuff like that. There's some strong language out there about Noodlers specifically catches a lot of flack for harming pens, and Baystate Blue is like the poster child for dangerous inks. There's a lot of people that use that ink very successfully in a lot of their pens. The ones that I've seen that have been the most troublesome have been certain inks. Have been troublesome in certain sack filling pens, especially like vintage sack filling pens. I'm still trying to talk to some people and see, because I don't deal with that stuff regularly, nor do I hear a lot of issues, but I have heard of enough where it's like, okay, there might be some kind of correlation, but it's hard because a lot of the sacks and stuff like that, you don't necessarily know what they're made of, especially if they're a lot older, and you don't know what condition they're in anyway. And then the inks that come out, you don't really know what the properties are because they don't publish like MSDS sheets and stuff for these inks. So a lot of it is just kind of guessing. So, unless I am hearing about something and able to see like a very noticeable trend, which I really haven't, it's hard for me to make like definitive statements. So as far as like just harming the pens and stuff like that, I really don't have anything that solid to say like you definitely shouldn't use such and such ink and such pen. There are nibmeisters out there, like I know Richard Binder's got something that says like don't use Baystate Blue in a pilot pen. I haven't really seen that being an issue personally. Don't use certain inks in these latex sacks and stuff like that. I've been talking with Brian Gray. He's had a few inks, like the more saturated ones that have had some issues in his latex sacks. So I'm still trying to get to the bottom of that, but not to scare you too much. It's very rare in the grand scheme of things that actually happens. But the ones that I think is way more of an issue, forgive me, is just pens that are stubborn to clean and that can clog and stuff like that. Not necessarily like causing permanent damage to your pens, but just ones that are higher maintenance and are a little more hassle. That is probably 99% of what people talk about when they say it'll damage your pens. They're not talking about permanent damage, they're talking just in extremes of, inks that require a little more knowledge, a little more maintenance. So some of those, I've got some of those kind of summarized here. Any pigmented ink, so platinum, carbon black, any of the Sailor Nano inks, the Kiwaguro or the Seiboku, the platinum like pigmented blue, pigmented rose, and pigmented sepia. Those are the only pigmented inks that I can think of that are safe for fountain pens. Normally pigmented inks are calligraphy inks that you do not want to use in fountain pens. But those 6 inks that I just named you, the Sailor and the platinum ones, those are safe for fountain pens. However, they're pigmented, so they have small pigments in them, just like latex paint has pigment in it instead of dye, because it's really good at light fastness. That's mainly why it is. But if you think about it, there's very small pigments that are flowing through this very small feed channel in your fountain pen. If it dries up or you don't clean it out regularly or whatever, then it's going to be much more likely to clog because you have actual small physical objects that are flowing through that feed instead of just a liquid dye, which is what most fountain pen ink is made of. So any pigmented ink that you use, you're going to have a more likelihood of higher maintenance. Iron gall ink, like Diamine Registrars. I know there's some others out there. Rowan Klingner has a couple. Salix, Scabiosa. Salix? Salix. I don't know why I call it Salix. I always call it Salix. Scabiosa. Those are iron gall. I don't hear about as many issues with those. Diamine Registrars is one of the more truer iron gall inks that I hear for fountain pens. Most everything else is some kind of like modern formulation. And even that, that's like much less true iron gall. True iron gall is only used for calligraphy, and its stuff is it's like tar, you know what I mean? It's like an India ink almost. But the Registrars is Still a modern formula, but it's a little closer to it. And the whole thing with iron gall, you can look, Wikipedia's got a really good page if you look up iron gall ink, but it's a natural ink that's comes from oak galls, and it's acidic, so it's slightly corrosive. So it's just, you'll want to clean it out. You don't want to leave it in a super valuable pen for long periods of time, that kind of thing. So it's more just, you have to kind of watch out a little bit. I've heard about a couple of issues with Diamine Registrars, like that people use it in the same pen over a very extended period of time, but I haven't heard of any issues with any Roaring Cleaner or any other modern formulations. Some other ones, Noodler's Eternal inks, especially like the Russian and the UK inks, they tend to get really clingy and be tough to clean out of the pen and can have some clogging issues and stuff like that, so you have to use them pretty regularly, clean them diligently and stuff like that. They do have light fastness. They are very UV resistant and water resistant and stuff like that, with some colors that you wouldn't find with those characteristics otherwise, but they are some maintenance. The other, like Noodler's Eternals, like Hunter, Fox, Periwinkle, Luxury Blue, all the ones that come in the little 1 ounce bottles, those are all a little higher maintenance as well. Noodler's Kung De Cheng and Whaleman Sepia, their highlighter inks like the Dragon Cat series, and then the Baystate inks are higher maintenance as well. The Baystates are kind of a different breed than all the other ones, and these ones are all just like, they're a little tougher to clean, you know. But the Baystates, they will not clean up with your normal cleaning chemicals, you know, like dish fluid and pen flush and stuff like that. But if you're using a Baystate ink, bleach is what cuts through the Baystates. So you don't want to use straight bleach, but just a dilution of like regular household bleach, which is already very diluted. Use like 10% of that to 90% water. Clean that through the pen, and that will cut through the Baystate pretty well. Also, if you're like get Baystate stain in your kitchen sink or whatever, use like a Bon Ami or like some kind of bleach solution, and that'll clean that out pretty well. Other ones are inks with heavy sheen, like the Herbin 1670, so like Rouge Hematite, Stormy Gray, the New Blue Ocean. Those all have like a gold fleck in there, so they're going to, you know, they put a disclaimer on the bottle saying like highly saturated ink, watch out. But you know, basically it doesn't cause any permanent harm. It just means that if you let it dry up in your pen, it's going to clog, and you're going to have to really flush it out to clean it. Those actually clean up pretty well with just water though. And then other inks like Diamine Majestic Blue is one that I can think that's really got a heavy sheen to it. Private Reserve Electric DC Blue, Noodler's Autumn and Azure. Those are some other, especially dark blues, that I can think that have kind of those characteristics. Other ones, Super5 and DA Document inks. Those are permanent inks that I don't really know how they attain their permanence. I know they're not iron gall, but I don't know exactly what they are, but they tend to be kind of clingy as well. Both of those absorb really quick into the paper, and they dry really fast. So I don't think that they're formulated exactly the same as the Noodler's permanent inks, because they seem to have some different characteristics, but I don't really know, honestly, what they're made of. But I do know they're a little more work to clean out. So I'd watch out for some of those. Just be aware that pretty much, if I had to make one general statement, I would say any ink with permanent properties, it's going to be harder to clean. That really covers about 95% of all the troublesome inks out there is ones with permanence. So if you really want an ink that is trouble-free, go with a very desaturated, a non-permanent ink, especially something that comes from a pen-making company like Alamy ink or Waterman or Pelican or something like that. Those are all going to be pretty safe inks, you know. But in general, that's a pretty good thing to go off of. And you know, if you're watching this and you have any other inks that you know that are kind of, you know, tougher to clean out, go ahead and leave it in the comments too, because this isn't an exhaustive list that I have here, but it covers some of the big ones.